the brands that are hot sometimes get a lot of the
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
And it almost is like the story needs to catch up to the reality of where they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that speaks to your point around consistency and clarity around the FDD and the 19 that we put out there.
I think a little bit more transparency. I mentioned, having consistency
Yeah.
across item 19. I
Right.
think that would be really helpful for everyone, so that we're we're all kind of being judged by the same
Yeah. And speaking the same language.
measure. And
Yeah.
yes, it's
Right.
better said.
Welcome to Franchise Leader Spotlight. I'm Katherine LeBlanc. This series highlights the leaders shaping franchising today, how they built their careers, what they're focused on now, and what they believe is coming next for the industry. Let's dive in. Brought to you by my podcast host. Hi, today's conversation is with Jennifer Durham. She is SVP of Franchise Development with Potbelly. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much. This is so much fun. And we haven't even gotten started.
I am going to jump right in. And so I want to know today, what is the most exciting thing about your job?
I have the privilege of leading franchising and development at Potbelly. And if you're not familiar with Potbelly, Potbelly is a really super cool and fun brand. Our tagline is great food and good vibes. And so, what is the most thrilling thing about what I get to do is I get to share what that Potbelly brand is for people that haven't experienced it, for franchise prospects that are looking to create a new business opportunity in restaurants with a really great sandwich brand. And I know we'll get into some more details
Yeah.
about just how awesome it is, but that's kind of fuels me. If you do know the Potbelly brand, based in Chicago, it's just really a legacy of a brand. It'll turn 50 years old in January of 2027. And I think that really shocks some people, is that we've been around that long. At this point, it's really thrilling to be able to think about where we're at today with 467 shops and where we'll be in 10 years at 2000. So I have definitely the best job in the company for sure.
Well, and I love that you just went right into a pitch because I have to say, I interview a lot of people and sometimes they leave out kind of the why behind the brand. And
Yeah.
so I think that you are a true Fran Dev expert for working right that in right at the top. But I want to know, obviously you're speaking about the brand in a very enthusiastic way. And when people talk about sales, they want to sell something that they love. And so
Yeah.
I love, just in general, as you've built your career, do you often seek out brands that you are already passionate about, or do you get passionate about them once you join? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that is a really great question. So I am not a salesperson. My background is I'm a CPA, still a CPA in the state of Florida. And that's my origin. So when it comes to my career, I only have worked with brands that I am passionate about because frankly, Catherine, I can't fake it.
Okay.
And I have been a consumer and kind of a lover of the brand that is critically important to me.
Okay.
In my history, my career started really in restaurants at Checkers and Rallies. And I was there for 18 years doing a variety of different roles.
Okay.
But I knew of the brand because in college, I didn't have a car. I would ride my bike across campus to get to, I'd be studying, it'd be late and it was open late. And I had a craving for, a Checker burger and fries. And if you know Checkers, you know that the fries are pretty addictive. And so when the opportunity came, my career path was not necessarily to make food. I was an accountant.
Right. Yeah.
But when that accounting position came to be, I loved the brand and I had that connection. I then, after Checkers, went to Cooper's Hawk. And if people don't know Cooper's Hawk, another Chicago-based company like Potbelly, I was a wine club member. And so I loved the brand and knew about Cooper's Hawk from the perspective of a diner and a wine club member. And they needed somebody to lead development. And that somebody had kind of been there, done that as they were looking to scale their growth. And I was privileged and had a well-timed call from a recruiter about that opportunity. So again, a real love of the brand. Hand and Stone, again, member and client of that brand. And it was time to pivot into something outside of restaurants. And so I was interested and intrigued about learning a different industry. Oh, by the way, there couldn't be more different industry than, what was interesting and kind of the connectiveness of my wine club membership
Mhm.
experience at Cooper's Hawk and the Hand and Stone membership was membership, and
Okay.
how
Yeah.
critically important that was to the business.
Mm.
So learned an absolute ton. And then a friend and colleague of mine, Adam Noyes, who's now the president of Potbelly, was looking for a leader
Yeah.
to support franchising and development. And we had done that successfully together at
Okay.
Checkers and
Yeah.
Rallies. And he works at Potbelly.
Yeah.
And I had grown up in Chicago, was very familiar about the brand and how
Okay.
just fun it is. And so that's my progression.
Yeah.
But back to your question, to me, the love of the brand has to be really
Mhm.
true and core.
Mhm.
That's really hard to fake.
Yeah. Well, for some people. I do, I do a lot of interviews and not just, for podcasting, but for hiring. And it does amaze me in the interview process how many times I ask the person, have you been to this brand yet? And they say, oh, no, not yet. I'm like, well, you probably should before the next interview. So let's
Exactly,
get it going.
exactly. Understand always from the consumer
Yes.
ends
Hmm.
of what the brand's all about.
Yeah. Well, tell me, what's something in your role today that some people might misunderstand?
Yeah. So I think the big misunderstanding about Potbelly is how large it is. I think folks are
Mm,
very
okay.
often surprised that we have 467 shop
Hmm.
locations. And so when I say Potbelly, first of all, everybody to a person is like, "Oh, I love Potbelly,"
Yes.
which
Yeah.
totally jazzes me up
Great.
because I
Yeah.
feel very much the same
Hmm.
way. And then when they ask about, how many locations, I think they're expecting 50 or 100. Nearly 500 is
Yeah.
very often shocking to
Hmm.
people. The good news is we have a lot more room to grow, and
Hmm.
so getting to 2,000 is very much within reach. But I think that's maybe a big misnomer.
Okay.
I'll add to that, the other really unique thing about Potbelly that I don't know that everybody knows is that, and it may touch on that first point, which is people don't realize how many locations that we have.
Hmm.
But that is that every single Potbelly location is unique
Mm.
and different.
Mm.
There are some consistencies, and that you will see shop to shop, but we intentionally have elements, artistic, pieces in
Mhm.
every shop that are connected to that neighborhood. We have a workshop in downtown Chicago. Mark Winger leads the workshop and has been with the brand for over 20 years. He's a true artisan, and his team looks at when a shop is going to open. We just opened a shop in Georgetown, Texas,
Okay.
which is in Austin, and they research what is unique and special about that. And poppies are unique and
Yeah.
special in Austin and that particular town. And so you go into his shop and there's this really cool poppy that's in the shape of a guitar because Potbelly is connected to music, and so that's a little bit of an
Right.
Easter egg at
Yeah.
that
Right.
location. So our intent is to really be the favorite neighborhood, sandwich shop,
Mhm.
and we are not just saying that we're different. We
Right.
really are
Yeah.
different in every shop. So people take
Mhm.
on, and I was talking to somebody yesterday. They have their picture on the wall in the shop in Naperville because they were on the
Okay.
baseball team,
Right.
and it's those connections that again, going back to you can't fake it. That's truly part of who we are.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of brands that talk about what they want to be and what they want to be to their customers. There are maybe 10 to 20% that actually intentionally execute on what they want to be. And I think that that's a great example of how a brand can say, I want to be the local neighborhood sandwich shop. Okay, well, then how are we going to do that? And how are we going to execute against it? And so one of your elements is, the localization of the location. And I think that, it's a good lesson to hear around and the resources were put into delivering on that,
Sure.
right? So you
Yeah.
have a workshop, you have somebody who's been leading it for 20 years. And when we think about kind of brand efficiencies and how do we, drive EBITDA and hit
Yeah.
our revenue goals, some of that can get cut, land on the cutting room floor. And when you don't deliver on it, then you have this empty promise and then you don't get passionate fans that
Right.
get excited every time you hear that you're from a brand. So I love that your brand is taking the extra step to say, okay, if we want to be this, then what are the pillars? And I think it's as simple as saying these are the pillars that we're going to deliver on. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but it does have to be unique to you.
So such a well said.
Mhm.
The point I would make is it'd be really easy for somebody in my job to look at, I'll say, the spend and
Mhm.
developing a shop. And we do, and we look to optimize that as best we can. we could go to mass produced furniture
Mhm.
and kind of a standard art package.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be true to Potbelly.
Right.
And so we need to there are
Yeah.
some elements that are, I'll call it more mass produced,
Mhm.
but there are tabletops that have, the seal for the city or the town that
Mhm.
shop is
Mhm.
in, or
Yeah.
these unique elements that are optimized as best we can,
Mhm.
to have that balance of
Yeah.
localization that you talked
Mhm.
about. And again, it is a top of focus
Yeah.
to be certain that the investment is right sized, but we do have to make sure that we're not compromising too much
Mhm.
on the experience,
That's right.
because I
Mhm.
know you've talked to a lot of
Mhm.
leaders about in the restaurant space, and if your experience doesn't deliver,
Mhm.
then there's just too many
Yeah.
options
Yeah.
of restaurants
Yeah.
for customers to choose from. So
Right.
you have to protect that.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what we try to do.
Yeah. And I think that, it and if you're thinking about your brand and how you bring those things to life, it doesn't have to be everything. It just has to be 2 or 3 touch points. But I also love what you said around, even though you are creating that local feel, you've standardized how you do it. And so in franchising, I get really nervous when you said, like, we customize every location. I'm like,
Right.
where's the consistency?
Yeah,
You're a
exactly.
franchise.
Yeah.
But you just said it, right? Like, your consistency is in the drawings and illustrations that you have and the tabletops. And so even though it's unique to that location, you've standardized
Right.
how it's going to be
Yeah. The shape
produced.
is still
That's awesome. Yeah.
36-inch,
Right.
round.
I
It's
love it.
just
Yeah.
what's on
Yeah.
top, and how do you make, and I think the experience that, going back to that, the customers understand that's the consistent part. They expect when they go into a Potbelly
Yes.
that they're going to hear great music and it's going to
Mhm.
be really super eclectic. I didn't touch on, and maybe this goes back to your other question about what do people not know or what's the
Yeah.
misconception. Potbelly started in an antique store, 1977.
Mhm. Well, that makes sense if you think about what's in the stores. Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And maybe that was a surprise to you to know that too, but that's the quirkiness, that's the good vibes part of
Yeah.
it, is it's never too perfect. It's all just curated, and I think that's ultimately what again, that
Yeah.
leading to the experience, that's what we're trying to do, is
Yeah.
have that fun, quirky,
Yeah.
good vibe.
I love it. Well, you're pulling it off.
Oh, thanks.
So obviously we kind of talked about your background and your background in franchising.
Yes.
So you have an amazing view of kind of not only the breadth of experience, but also kind of touching different industries. What do you think franchising is getting right now?
I think there's a lot of emphasis on unit level economics.
Yes. Hmm.
I said I'm a CPA, so that kind of
Yes.
that hits me, because ultimately, if you're not delivering on that, then in my personal opinion, you shouldn't be franchising.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I do think the intent and a focus on improving profitability and being more transparent across the spectrum of any franchise restaurants and other industries is a really, really good thing. Having more continuity and consistency. Right now, there's a lot of variability. If you look at item 19 for Potbelly
Hmm.
versus our
That's
competitors, you'll
true.
see a lot of differences. So I'd love to have a little bit more uniform in that, so that
Hmm.
the franchise owners and prospective franchise owners can better understand how things stack up. But
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly a lot of manipulation you can bring to your item 19.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, in my personal view, more is better. And I do think
Hmm.
that the franchise prospect, regardless of what industry you're in, and certainly I'm looking for a different type of candidate at
Hmm.
Potbelly than I was at Hand and Stone.
Right.
But I do think that the level of sophistication is improving. And frankly, AI is helping folks get more educated. These 300-page documents are a lot to digest. So,
Hmm.
comparing and contrasting and kind of distilling what the really meaningful
Right.
differences are
Yeah.
is a lot easier today than it was even 5 years ago.
So you feel like we're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. I
Yeah.
do.
Good. So looking back at your career journey, I'd love to know if there was a lesson that you learned but didn't realize it was a leadership lesson until later.
Yeah. One of the biggest lessons was that transition from leading an accounting and a finance team
Mm-hmm.
to leading a development team. And as any great leader that shifts roles, some learns, when you go from a functional leader to one that has to really lead through the expertise of other people, that is a hard adjustment.
Mm.
Um, you know, very simply, anytime I ask somebody to help me out with a report or analysis, I could do a journal entry. I could do whatever it was that I was asking them to do. Very different when I stepped
Yeah.
into a franchise development and real estate and design and construction. I was no longer the subject matter expert in
Yeah.
any of those areas. And I don't know that I did it looking back on it, I probably wasn't very graceful in the way
Yeah.
that I transitioned. I always felt like it was hard because I felt really dumb.
Yeah.
I used to know the answers, and
Right.
now I was asking all the questions. And then I kind of got further into my career and I realized, wow, asking good questions, that's a superpower.
Yes.
And if
And
you don't know the answers,
right.
sometimes it's all about asking
Right.
those right questions, or frankly asking questions that hadn't sometimes people do what they've been doing and they're
Yeah.
in like autopilot,
Right.
not even
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Right.
So the ability to kind of take a step back and have that fresh look, it was a gift. It was a gift, and I'm
Well, and I think that it's wonderful that I think what I'm hearing from you that maybe you haven't recognized is that even in moving into that role and asking the questions, you showed a leadership skill that I don't think a lot of people bring to the table. And especially as you think about, you went from a function to a function, but and I'm sure as you came up, you also went through the transition of actually becoming a manager, which is very difficult. Nobody kind
sure,
of
sure.
teaches. But when you're coming into a role, like you said, that where you're managing folks that you haven't been there before and you're their boss. And so instead of coming in and asking questions, you come in and say, well, I know all of the answers and this is how you have to do it. That happens, right?
Sure, sure.
And so I think even the act of getting into the details and asking the questions shows a leadership style that certainly I'm sure your team responded well to.
Yeah, that vulnerability,
Mhm.
and because who likes an arrogant person that thinks they have all the answers? It really did help to build trust with the
Mhm.
team, and even now, as do have the
Yeah.
experience, and I may have a perspective,
Mhm.
I think it's really still important to ask questions because with every shift in a brand, what worked there may not work here,
Yeah.
and I think you do have to challenge
Mm.
the status quo, but also challenge your own biases when you
Mm.
do have that experience.
You're probably better at it than you thought.
So,
So tell me if there was a moment in your career that changed how you think about leadership.
yeah, besides the one that I just
Mhm.
mentioned, for sure. I think that the other thing that was really important, and this came up actually, I'm here at IFA this week, and I did the annual leadership development session on Monday, and I was reminded of this that I don't know that I always prioritized my peer team as
Oh,
much
yes.
as I could have, should have, and
Mhm.
try to do
Yeah.
now. We don't None of us does anything alone. And I think very often in my career, I've thought about my manager,
Mhm.
a leader, and my team. And
Yeah.
the forgotten ones are the ones that are in their respective functional roles. And the importance of building that team. We talked about it a little earlier
Yes.
before this
Yeah.
conversation even started. It is just so important. It's the way you really get the work done. I'm not
Mhm.
diminishing the importance of the strategic leader at the top and
No.
the team that's helping you get there, but your peers are
Mhm.
really important, and they're gonna, if you avail yourself to it, they're gonna really help support you if you ask for it. And asking for help, I'm never
Yeah.
shy to ask for that if I need it. And fortunately, I've had really great peer group teams
Mhm.
and all the brands that I've been with. And so I think that's just a really important thing to remind yourself of. Don't forget
Oh, I
yeah,
absolutely agree. I learn more from my peers than anyone else.
yeah.
I think that in marketing, our partner is ops. And then often, especially in the restaurant space, I found that it wasn't just ops, it was also tech.
Mm,
So ops,
yes,
tech, and marketing, right? How are you developing those relationships? How are you prioritizing those relationships so that you have speed to trust? Because
yeah,
marketing comes up with the ideas, ops executes them, tech oftentimes supports and
that's
creates the
right.
thing that's coming through. And so if we aren't all working together and we don't have that level of trust, it becomes really hard to get anything done. And I do think that it just like management, you can learn management through books, of course, but like there is no kind of formal training or it's kind of figuring it out on the job. A lot of times I encourage leaders to encourage those peer relationships because without kind of the permission from leaders to develop and run,
Mhm.
I think you can abandon putting in the time to build that relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned books, and so I'll plug one because
Mhm.
Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of a Team is a
Yes,
really good
it
one
is.
on that importance of the peer team and how if something's broken there, you just can't really advance,
Yeah, yeah,
the collective,
mhm,
objectives, so
yeah.
it's a good one.
Nails on that one. Tell me, what do you think about the future of franchising?
Yeah. Really optimistic
Okay.
about growth, and again, I mentioned here at IFA, I think there is, 2025 was a pretty unstable year for a lot
Oh my
of
gosh.
brands, right?
Say it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, no, preach,
Yes.
right? And I think what I've heard from, the folks that are at this conference is that there's just a lot of optimism for what's ahead in terms of growth. I think that I mentioned earlier the intention or the focus on unit economics. I think that's really good
Mhm.
for brands. And I also saw something really interesting in the report that was released last week ahead of this IFA conference, and that was on closures and
Mm.
success rate
Mhm.
of brands. And I haven't heard it talked about too much here, but I know at Potbelly our focus is to make sure that we're supporting every opening and opening as well as we can. We have
Yeah.
aggressive growth plans,
Yeah.
and we will deliver on
Mm.
that. So, sometimes
Right.
when you're so growth focused that and you have that
Mm.
objective as a company, you can lose sight
Yeah.
of those
That's
467,
right.
and
Yeah.
not all of them are doing. Most of them are doing pretty good,
Yeah.
but the ones that are struggling, how are we going to help them? Getting creative and preserving shops to prevent closures. Closures to me are always the worst. I just never want to throw in the towel or give in too
Mhm.
easily. Or yeah, I think creative people can put their heads together and come up
Mhm.
with solutions. And so we've been able to do that in a couple situations
Good.
at
Yeah.
Potbelly that I think I'm, excited about the continuation.
Right.
And so to that point on the outlook, the 2026 outlook the IFA put out, you'll see in 2025 success rate was lower. It's been going down for the past 5 years.
Mm.
So I think if leaders were to look at their portfolio
Mhm.
and focus a little bit on the bottom, not at the expense of growing the top, but
Right.
just don't give in so easily.
I love that. What do you think franchising needs more of?
Mm, I think a little bit more transparency. I mentioned, having consistency
Yeah.
across item 19. I
Right.
think that would be really helpful for everyone, so that we're we're all, kind of being judged by the same,
Yeah, and speaking the same language.
measure. And
Yeah.
yes, it's
Right.
better said.
Mhm.
So I'd love to see more of that. I'd love for brands to also have, more exposure. What I mean by that is there's emerging brands that are really exciting, and I have been exposed to a few of them this week, giving them a platform to share
Showcase.
what's
Yeah.
unique and
Right.
different about them.
Mhm.
There there literally is like a franchise for
For
everything.
everything.
Sometimes we don't always see that, but I was
Right.
reminded yesterday there's a not-for-profit franchise that does meal planning kits for those that are food insecure. And I'm like, holy cow, there's a not-for-profit
Yeah.
franchise. Like,
Yeah.
ah, just always, it never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
But would love for those concepts to have some more visibility as well.
Mm. And what do we need less of?
Oh gosh, the clutter. I think, and I would love to. I think I'm trying to think of a great way to say this, Catherine. The brands that are hot sometimes get a lot of the
Yeah.
attention,
Yeah.
and it almost is like the story needs to catch up to the reality of
Mm.
where they
Yeah.
are. So
Well, I think that speaks to your point around consistency and clarity around the FDD and the 19 that we put out there. And how do you almost want to see a chart that everybody's equal and then add them all up because to your point, the hotness sometimes comes from the newness. And certainly in marketing, we use that to our advantage, especially
yes,
in
yeah,
food marketing
yeah,
where it's,
yeah,
the new news strategy. But in franchising, that newness that combines with the hotness, it doesn't, to your point, catch up with reality
right,
of, okay, well, what is the sustainability of the brand? Because these are 10-year agreements. We think that every brand's going to be McDonald's, which has been around for
yeah,
eons, but that's just not reality. And is it fair for the folks who are coming in at the hotness or because of the, like, I think to your point, the clutter of pick this one, pick this one, pick this one, because this is the next big thing. And it's almost like you're using the fear, the scarcity
Mindset.
Yes, you're using the scarcity and the mindset to pull them in. And honestly, that scarcity mindset is what screws you in
Yeah.
franchising, because you don't want your franchisees to have that scarcity mindset.
Yeah. And what I would say is sales beget sales. It's not about the sale. It's about does the
Yes.
shop open well? And
Mhm.
that's what really matters.
Yes.
And so
Right.
and trust me, there's a long time between the sale and the actual opening. So there
Right.
could be
Mhm.
plenty of deals in the pipeline. We have a fair number,
Yeah.
but it's important, but
Mhm.
not as important as how are they opening and how
That's right. Yeah.
successful are they and
Mhm.
how are we continuing to drive
Mhm.
those economics to make sure that the return on investment is there and so that owners are looking to open
Yeah.
the next one and their next one and
Mhm.
the next one. So just disconnecting the news and the hotness of the sold deal from the reality of the opening.
What do you think? That's it is a theme that I've heard around. Let's take away. I've sold 100 units, and that's the headline. And the thought process is let's replace it with some more sustainable headlines. But I haven't heard anyone kind of say, well, this is what we should be headlining.
Yeah.
And to your point, you're saying, well, let's headline the success of your open rates or of your success rates
Yes.
or like those, just so elevate maybe those different KPIs in
Yeah.
your franchise development kind of speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
How strong did the shop open?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and perhaps Potbelly went through a transition in October of last year where we were acquired by Racetrack.
Mhm.
Um, it's been a wonderful integration of our two cultures that are really very nicely aligned.
Mhm.
Also, a growth organization, but in a wildly different
Right.
industry than
Yeah.
restaurants. And I think we're learning it's fun when you expand your thinking
Mhm.
beyond your own. I mean, we all just get kind of groupthink.
Mhm.
It dawned on me yeah, exactly what you just said, that our focus and headlines aren't always on the ultimate thing that matters. And because
Mhm.
we are now private, we can have maybe a little bit more freedom to talk
Mm.
about those
Mhm.
things
Yeah.
than a
Yeah.
public company could,
Yeah.
as far as opening performance or
Mhm.
some other measures
Yeah.
of success.
Okay.
One of the things I'm really proud of at Potbelly is that we have had positive sales and traffic growth. There's not a lot of fast
There's
casual
that.
brands
Right.
that can claim that. And earnings releases happening for Q4. We're like, oh, okay. Portillo's down 3%,
Mhm.
Potbelly up 3%, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah. And that's the headline, right?
And
Like that's
that's
the
the
headline
headline.
that you want. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I love that. All right, let's go do it.
Yes. Yes. I think we should.
I think we should. I'm ready. Well, Jennifer, it's been so nice talking to you today. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining me.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I
Good.
appreciate it.
Brought to you by my podcast host.